Australia is the world's largest island. Geographic separation over thousands of years resulted in 90% of the species found in Australia being endemic to this vast land. And for the locals, living here means living amongst some of the world's most dangerous animals. Some of these animals can kill instantly, others leave lasting injuries, and some can just inflict a nasty bite. In all, 72 animals can cause us damage. But which one tops the list of most dangerous? Cruising into the spotlight is an apex predator with an appetite for anything it can sink its teeth into. Consider this: the next time you head down to the beach, there may be waiting for you in that deep blue water a massive predator the size of a small car, loaded with dozens of rows of razor-sharp teeth, and a not-too-fussy eater. So do you take the plunge? This scary beast is the tropical tiger shark, one of the fiercest carnivores in the ocean, and a known man-eater. Are you afraid? You should be.
Tiger sharks are in the top 3 for shark attack, and so they've attacked people all around the world.
They're a very impressive, very large growing shark.
Tigers are the kingpin of sharks in tropical waters.
Senior aquarist at Sydney Sea Life Aquarium, Martin Garwood, works with these sharks both in and out of captivity.
The tiger shark is a tropical species that you can find in warmer oceans throughout the world. So they're quite large growing. They can be up to 6 meters long, which is extremely impressive, and they're an apex predator.
The tiger shark is one of the largest predatory sharks in the world, with little to fear in the open ocean, so it can hunt with impunity. The shark can grow to over 6 meters long, weigh more than 100 men, and has an intimidating wedge-shaped head to complete the picture. It has acute eyesight in pretty much any conditions, so this makes it a nocturnal hunting machine. The tiger can inflict a serious bite on its prey, with around 3 tons per centimeter square of pressure with each bite. Combine that biting power with that giant mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, which cut, tear, and grind. Its prey stand no chance at all. It has a phenomenal range, regularly crossing oceans, and in doing so, traveling thousands of kilometers of the world's tropical waters each year. The tiger shark's range is even more remarkable when you consider that during its journey, it dives hundreds of meters at a time. James Cook University's marine biologist Richard Fitzpatrick finds the data on the tagged tiger sharks astounding.
We started putting depth loggers on them, and we found tiger sharks would go from the surface down to 450 meters and back to the surface like every 30 or 40 minutes. Why are they doing this? We have no idea. They could be chasing prey. They may be, as you go deep, the water gets a lot cooler, so they may be affecting their metabolic rate. They may be resting. And we've had tigers, that we've tracked for over 12 months that have gone tens of thousands of kilometers. And the most surprising thing for us, when we started tagging the tiger sharks up at Rain Island, we initially thought tigers were a shark associated with the Great Barrier Reef, staying close to the reef. Most of the hits we had were out in the middle of the coral sea. Well, what are they doing out there?
There is still much to learn about the tiger shark, and the more that's discovered, the more questions that are raised. The name tiger shark comes from the dark bands that cross its torso, which gradually fade away as they enter full maturity.
Tiger sharks mature over 3 meters in size, so you're looking probably about 12 to 15 years to get to that kind of size range. And then the number of pups they have depends on the size of the female, so the larger the female gets, the more pups she can have.
Tiger sharks mate only once every 3 years, and the female has many good reasons to limit its contact with males.
Shark sex is actually very violent. Because the male has to insert his sex organ into the female, he has to hang on to her. And because he hasn't got arms or hands, the only thing he can use is his mouth. So he'll give the female love bites. And so you can tell when a female shark's been mated with recently, she's got a lot of injuries around the pectoral fins or around the gill region. But what happens is that female sharks generally grow a head length larger than males. So when they're having sex, and the male's hanging onto the gills or the pectoral fin, the sex organs are aligned for mating. And also female sharks have skin twice as thick as males that help protect them during the love bites.
This shark has a reputation for not being too worried about what they eat. In fact, they are known as the garbage eaters of the ocean.
Tiger sharks are an opportunistic predator. They eat a very wide range of food, and sometimes they eat things that aren't even food, like junk and rubbish has been found in their stomachs when dissected. So they eat reptiles, birds, mammals, and mostly fish.
There's a lot of famous stories about, tiger sharks being found with license plates and all those kind of things in them. And there was an interesting case in Australia back in the 40s where a tiger shark was found with a guy's arm in it, and the arm had a tattoo, and it was the missing evidence used in a murder case where the body had been thrown in the water and the tiger shark came and ate the corpse. But it was caught, and subsequently a guy was put in jail.
So best idea would be to not put yourself in harm's way. That is in the water when they're eating and looking like their food.
As an opportunistic predator, tiger sharks will basically maul whatever they can get their teeth on that they see as a food source. So that can be turtles at the surface when they're taking a breath. That's when turtles are vulnerable, and that's a prime food source for tiger sharks. They are often eating turtles. So they grab hold of their food, they maul it, they thrash around, and they try and cause as much damage as they can.
The attacks on surfers where they occur are generally it's a high-speed attack. So the shark would be lurking down on the surf zone, looking up, seeing a person on a boogie board or a surfboard, and mistaking them for being a green sea turtle, and there's coming up at high speed and hitting it. And then in a lot of those cases, the tigers will, it's a mistaken identity hit. The tiger will hit once and then swim off.
It's not that sharks are hunting out humans, it's their inquisitive nature. They're testing and tasting to see what we are. But I think that's why humans fear sharks, because when there is an attack, it's so severe because of the nature of these animals. They're incredibly powerful.
Shark biologist Amy Smoothie is currently involved in a research program exploring shark behavior for a public awareness program to try to separate fact from fiction. But there's a side to her job that can be quite confronting.
In the event of a shark-human interaction, I would go to the scene and do a forensic analysis to try and determine the species that's been responsible for the attack on the victim.
Only a few years ago, Amy Smoothie had the gruesome task of determining what attacked a young surfer on the northern New South Wales coast. He sustained injuries to the right calf of his leg, as well as minor injuries to his left calf.
So to determine what species was responsible for the attack, we do a forensic analysis. Through forensic analysis, we get images of the wounds or surfboards or wetsuits, and from that we look at the bite patterning, such as interdental distances and bite circumference, and we can then determine the species that was responsible for the attack. In this instance, we determined that it was a tiger shark, around 3 meters in total length. The intertooth distance is from the point here and the point here, and we can calculate the distance. Each shark has a very distinct bite pattern. For tiger sharks, you can see they've got a very curved tooth pattern, so their intertooth distance is very close, whereas white sharks and bull sharks have very distinct needle-like pin pricks. So we can clearly identify the species based on the nature of the shark bite patterning.
But it's not just surfers that are targeted by tiger sharks. They will happily make a meal of anyone who cares to venture into their feeding zone.
People love to snorkel over the reefs and all those beautiful corals that you can see in the tropical zones. So you could potentially encounter a shark while snorkeling or diving on reef systems. And the best thing to do, if you see it, keep it in your eye line. Make sure you know where it is and try and exit the water as quickly as possible.
So the next question is this fear rational, and why do we feel like this?
Well, I started being afraid of sharks. I saw the film Jaws. I was afraid to go swimming in the lake after Jaws. So, where does your fear come from? We know that generally people are less afraid of terrestrial predators than they are predators in the sea, because there's something about the deep, dark sea that unnerves them and frightens them.
Is the evidence there to justify the reputation of the tiger shark being one of the world's most dangerous man-eaters? Or are they just suffering a case of a bit of bad press? This initial fear of sharks triggered a lifelong interest in sharks by shark researcher William Winneram to learn more about these stunning creatures.
I've been diving with tiger sharks for more than 25 years, and I've never been ever aggressed by a tiger shark. I've encountered them while spearfishing with a fish that I've shot, a fish that's struggling, which is what brought them in. Had the shark swimming around and been able to kill the fish and deal with the tiger shark without the tiger shark aggressing me. It's obvious it's brought in because it senses a struggling fish. It's probably sensing the blood in the water, and it's very clear what it's after. It's not after me. And simply approaching it and gently tapping it and sometimes pushing it away, it leaves, or we leave, we get out of the water. But it's not aggressing me. So the biggest difference diving with tiger sharks or great white sharks. With tiger sharks, we're more relaxed. We're more at ease because we know we have a bigger margin for making mistakes. And you know, the great whites are always coming at you, and it's really obvious that they're trying to get in, sneak in close.
In the world of shark biology, it's clear that if you understand the behavior of the tiger shark, you're likely to be one of the few who will truly appreciate the majesty of this incredible animal at a personal level.
They're an amazing animal, and where we work up at Rain Island, you have thousands of turtles nesting on the beach each day. And the tiger sharks will migrate to that island from thousands of kilometres away to be there at the nesting time. I have seen the same shark in the same location and caught it 2 years in a row, 365 days apart, to the exact hour that it's come in to feed, and it's an easy meal for them.
Tagging tiger sharks is crucial to ongoing research for the better understanding of these magnificent creatures. But actually doing that is not easy. James Cook University's marine biologist Richard Fitzpatrick invented an ingenious device that makes the process less invasive.
The shark research I do, for me the most important thing is the welfare of the animal. So we have very quirky catching techniques. We don't use hooks. We catch our sharks by the tail. So we have these underwater rodeos, and I invented this device called the shark claw that snaps around the tail of the shark, particularly with the tigers. So we can target exactly what animal we want. So we stand in the boat, and when the shark swims close, we've got the pole and we lock the claw onto the tail of the shark. The shark swims off. It's got about 20 metres of rope and then a huge float. And when the shark starts swimming off and it drags this float, they stop swimming. So you can stop a 5-metre tiger shark in about a minute, and they will just hang there. And then we can pull the shark up. No stress to the animal, no stress to the researchers.
Whilst gathering research data on these magnificent animals requires good safety measures, it also has the bonus of being incredibly enjoyable.
The most fun part of the job for me is when you get to release the shark, is to actually jump in the water, hop on the back of the shark and swim it. And get the tail moving, and after a minute or so they're like, oh, okay, swimming, and you get to go for a little ride before the shark goes off. Except for the last one we did, she swam around us a few times to have a look, and then off she went. So it's a really nice, intimate way to get up close to these amazing, big, beautiful animals.
So it seems on balance that the tiger shark might just be a little misunderstood, and possibly the Jaws movie has a lot to answer for. But fear aside, without larger apex predators like the tiger shark, the oceans of the world could be a lesser place.
And so what the sharks are out there doing is they're taking out the sick and the injured, easy prey. And by doing that, it keeps the populations below them of their prey, like turtle, seals, genetically fit. Like if these animals are sick or injured or had some abnormality, that if a shark wasn't there to take them out, then that could travel through the population with time.
For Richard Fitzpatrick, diving with tiger sharks and filming their behavior is one of the truly amazing roles in his job. Unraveling the facts about this shark is a massive undertaking, but every dive reveals a little more.
On one occasion we actually had 22 tiger sharks around our boat during a feeding event. And the tigers have a different sort of mindset to the great white, and sort of, not that they're dumb at all, sort of almost like a bit of a punch-drunk boxer kind of thing. And the thing about tigers is that they'll be feeding on the turtle, and you may have been underwater with them for an hour or two, and they're feeding on the turtle, and then you can almost see the moment that they go, oh, I'll have a go at that. And they'll come in and have a go at you. You just smack them off with the camera and they're like, oh, I'll go back to the turtle now. And you can literally see that point. And I've had amazing experiences with tigers. There's been individuals I've built relationships with over weeks, watching them feed, and they've allowed me to get literally the lens next to their head while they're feeding on a turtle, and where I've been able to reach out and just push myself back off if I've got too close, and they just don't really care that you're there.
Animals are competitive by nature. They need to be to survive. So in keeping with the action, we're gonna rank them according to just how dangerous they can be. We'll scrutinize each one, highlighting how they can affect your life, quite literally, allowing you to decide if you're game enough to get as close as some of our experts. fun or not, most would probably agree playing with tiger sharks is a game for the experts. It's our first animal, so it's going to capture the lead position while we meet a small, feisty warrior with a big sting in its tail. Deep in the Tasmanian forest, there is the sound of a vacuum cleaner sucking up leaves, dirt, and one pesky little insect. These volunteers are putting themselves at risk as they hunt for one of Australia's most prolific and dangerous insects. The jack jumper ant is a carnivore and a scavenger.
You can find them at beaches, suburban backyards. You can't say that you won't see a jack jumper in any particular place in Tasmania. They can be anywhere.
You could be mistaken for thinking that these volunteers and staff from the Royal Hobart Hospital are trying to eradicate jack jumpers from the landscape. But as there are billions upon billions, that task would be much easier with a bulldozer than a small household hoover.
They upset the ants so that they start travelling out, and then as they come out, they'll get the dustbusters and suck the ant out of the nest. Once they've got as many as they can out of an individual nest, they will bring dustbusters back to me, and then I'll crack the dustbusters open into some big tubs. So then it's a sorting process. Each nest needs to be kept separate from another.
They're highly territorial and will fight intruders, even some from their own nest.
The ants are very much territorial, so if you put two nests in together, they'll attack each other. What we're after is the venom sac, so the tail end of the ant. So we want that to remain as complete as possible. So if they're fighting, all that's going to do is potentially damage the venom sac, and then that's of no use to us whatsoever.
It's the venom sacs from these collected ants that will be used to produce an active pharmaceutical ingredient to help desensitize severe reactions to the ants' toxins.
I collect ants, I dissect them, I make venom out of ant sacs. Venom for clinical use for those patients of ours who are allergic to the sting of a jack jumper ant.
There are 350 people in Tasmania alone who are on the hospital lists and need the antivenom on a regular basis. This makes the jack jumper one of the most dangerous ants on the planet. The jack jumper is an attacking ant. They'll come at you, grab you with their pinches, and then the tail will bend around and sting you from underneath. The venom that is injected is highly toxic, causing swift pain and the possibility of long-term after effects.
For an average person, you'd just get redness and a slight bit of swelling. But unfortunately, for 3% of the population, you can have a severe anaphylactic reaction, and that can mean that they can have chest tightness, they can have tongue swelling, they can have itchy throat, hoarse throat, vomiting, diarrhoea. They can be extremely dangerous with people with underlying cardiac problems. People have died from jack jumper sting in the past.
And today, it is Judy who has sustained a bite, and not for the first time.
I've been doing this for nearly 9 years, and in the first, I'd say, 5 or 6, nothing, absolutely nothing. And then in the last couple of years, I have, and they hurt like anything. I've been very fortunate, I've not reacted in any way. So they sting the end of their tail, and it's sort of a burning sensation. It's quite painful. My leg hurts right now.
The jack jumper ant is found throughout Tasmania, New South Wales, Victoria, and parts of South Australia. Their characteristic jumping motion when agitated gave them their name. The jack jumper ant's genome is contained on a single pair of chromosomes. Males have just one chromosome as they are haploid, the lowest number known or even possible for any animal. The major problem for people is just how easily encountered the jack jumper is.
They can wreak such havoc on people, and if you have people who will actually move house because of them, then that's terrible.
The ants are a problem, but they are also native to Tasmania. So rather than eradicating them, it's more effective to develop strategies to deal with them.
We have a really enthusiastic group of patients who their main aim is to return to the life they loved, but they've had that life-changing reaction where they've been terrified by the condition that they've been left in following an anaphylaxis. They're scared. So we offer them that treatment program to return them to the activities that they love and improve their quality of life. Never underestimate a jack jumper ant.
The jack jumper ant spares no enemies, causes great pain, and even death. But it's not going to knock the tiger shark from number 1. It's going to have to settle for second spot. But up next is a wild challenger that takes courtship to the menacing zone. Some Australian animals are usually placid, except in the mating season, when an unsuspecting camper may find themselves up against an unlikely opponent. The Australian bustard is just that, a placid bird that suddenly can turn a little nasty. The male bustard puts on a very dramatic mating display, mainly to attract a female, but also to assert its dominance over the region. At the Armadale Reptile and Wildlife Centre in Western Australia, it is mating season, and their bustard breeding pair are not happy to see intruders.
Birds displaying can get quite aggressive, as this male bustard or Australian wild turkey. As you can see, he has got a nice beak on him and he can get quite aggressive towards people. He just doesn't want me in his cage because he has got a female in here. And all he's trying to do now is trying to get me out. And these are found nearly all through Australia. And they're more found in the desert areas, Central Australia, where they're not interfered with, but they will only display a few months of the year. But there are quite a few animals do get quite aggressive when they're displaying, ready for breeding.
We have looked at many dangerous animals during this series, most of which are dangerous all the time, but there are animals that usually are quiet, but then get aggressive at breeding time. The frilled neck lizard is a good example of a displaying animal that can stand its ground when confronted. Another is the hairy-nosed wombat, more cute than aggressive, but there have been many recorded bites and scratches from this normally playful marsupial. Back to our bustard, and Klaus is still tempting fate inside the cage.
He just walks all over his food, and just gentle push him away, and he's quite all right with that. He's getting very agitated. He just wants us to be away. You can see how much smaller the female is than to the male.
The bustard is Australia's largest flying bird. The male stands at over 120 centimeters high, weighs over 14 kilos, and has a wingspan of over 2 meters. In 1 year, a bustard will cover over 500 kilometers by air and on foot. These are wide-ranging birds found throughout the dry areas of Australia. They can live up to 30 years and are adept at hiding in the undergrowth. Bustards are prized eating birds, first tasted by Captain James Cook in 1770.
Usually you find them only in pairs or in threes because they only have 1 or 2 eggs, and usually only the one of the babies survives. So you'll see a pair and a young one. You won't find them in big flocks. So I think they can get aggressive towards each other and I suppose because they're competing against the food source.
In Australia's arid deserts and in the marginal farmlands, food is scarce for the bustard. They have been known to eat almost anything to survive.
They can't be fussy where they come from. In the desert, mainly of course grasshoppers. They like the grasshoppers, but they'll eat anything what moves. They'll even eat small reptiles, eggs, basically anything.
Outback campers often see bustards standing tall in the bushes. They will be as still as possible until confronted, and that is when they will take flight or just run away. Disturbing their nests can be hazardous.
Well, normally they will nest away from people, right away from people. So if you approach their nesting area, you might see a little bit of aggression, but normally they will stay away.
But can a bustard inflict real damage? Well, it's back to Klaus in the cage.
Oh, he will have a peck, and he will have a fly trying to scare me away.
Mildly dangerous, the Australian bustard isn't going to make such a mark on the playing field. It's going to flap its way into third, but possibly not for long, as up next is a deadly animal known for breeding juvenile delinquents. This is a snake we almost forgot about. It's amongst the 20 deadliest in the world, but so little has been written about them. They are rare and seldom seen, but that does not make them harmless, although on first sight it's how they look that catches the attention.
It's from the black snake family, and it can grow up to about 2 metres, and it's quite colourful. It's quite a nice looking deadly snake. They're not aggressive, but if you scare them like any animal, they will defend themselves.
Klaus Gakehurst and his team at the Armadale Reptile and Wildlife Centre in Western Australia look after a large variety of animals, many of which have been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
We do a lot of education, and we do a display for the public, and we take a lot of animals in from being sick or injured, and then we try and release as many as we can.
For Klaus, there is only one type of collet snake that he is wary of.
Basically, just juveniles. Juveniles are very anxious to eat all the time, so they're striking a lot more than a lot of the adult snakes. So if you're going to get bitten, it's usually by a juvenile one. They don't miss any chances. If there's food around, they will try and get it.
The collet snake is also known as the Downs tiger snake. It is named after the Norwegian zoologist Robert Collett, who was the first to collect the snake in 1902. It is found mainly in the dry, arid areas of western Queensland. This is a snake that feeds on frogs and mice. They are usually a very placid snake, but that can change rapidly. It was previously thought to be mildly toxic, but more recently the strikes from a collet snake have caused renal failure and death. Ranked 19th in the list of the world's deadly snakes, the collet is best avoided. When provoked, they emit a loud hissing sound, followed by a couple of false strikes. After that comes the real bite. This is one easily angered snake. Despite its danger, its attractive markings make it a popular collector's snake. Popular with the collectors, but not likely with anyone else, this sizable snake is slithering in above the Jack Jumper Ant, which will drop to 3rd, bumping the Australian Bustard to 4th. But keen to take on the pack is a creature with incredible camouflage ability and a lightning-fast strike. An encounter with some deadly animals can happen to you anywhere, anytime, without any warning within a blink of the eye.
I don't know if you can see, there's trees in the way, but this is right here in the bush is an adult northern death adder. Now, what makes these snakes dangerous is the fact that you can barely see them. So the majority of the bites that people get are actually from treading on them. And that's not a deliberate ploy for humans, it's actually a strategy that they employ for hunting. So death adders are an ambush predator, which means they lay in wait, and I'll see if I can bring it out.
The death adder is one of the most common snakes in Australia and is found in many of Australia's forests, woodlands, grasslands, and heaths. It has such good camouflage that you would struggle to see it, even after closer examination. This puts it on a collision course with humans, as the adder will not flee, it just sits and waits.
Interestingly, the death adder was originally called the deaf adder, as in deaf, it couldn't hear. And when Europeans first came to Australia, they realised all Australian snakes ran away except for this one, and they assumed it didn't hear them coming, so they called it the deaf adder. And then science later proved that all snakes are deaf, and they don't have ears at all, so it didn't make sense. But then at that stage in Australia, 50% of all known bites were lethal. So they changed the name deaf to death adder, and it was more appropriate, and it stuck to this day. So they give you an indication. It was about 50% fatality if you just took your luck and didn't get any antivenom. You still got 50% survival rate. You don't want to take those odds, do you?
The death adder is just another member of the elapid snake family, and like most of its cousins, it's venomous.
The elapid family have fixed front fangs that are like little hypodermic syringes. They're not as big as fangs like the adders of Europe and the viper group, but the elapid family has far more toxic venom than the viper group, and they only have small, very sharp fangs equivalent to a hypodermic syringe. They don't need to get that deep in. Being a venom, it's just got to break the skin to be envenomated. So all that fang has to do is scratch you and it can envenomate you.
The death adder has one of the world's strongest snake venoms, which it uses to kill its prey of small frogs, lizards, mammals, and birds. It has a wide triangular-shaped head at the end of its well-camouflaged fat body and grows up to around the length of a man's arm. The death adder has the longest fangs of any of Australia's venomous snakes, and so it's the perfectly designed predator, loaded with venom, unseen by prey, and it's fast.
Death adders are short, fat snakes with very large heads and very long fangs. So if that death adder bites you, those fangs can really get the venom even through, relatively thick pants and so forth. So you're quite likely to get an effective bite. And because they have a large head, the venom glands are quite large. So there's a fair bit of venom involved.
And they wait for a prey to come, and to entice the prey to come, they have this lure on the end of their tail. And that lure there is wiggled, and it attracts in a mouse, a lizard or a skink, and they think it's a worm. They come in to grab it, and fast as a flash, the death adder is around on its own tail, and it's got itself a prey item. Part of one of the features that makes a death adder dangerous is the lightning fast strike. This strike is partly to grab their prey, but also so they don't get bitten by their prey. The prey doesn't see the strike coming. It happens with lightning speed.
When they're sitting in strike position, they have one of the fastest strikes of any known snake. And they can move as fast as a bullet in their strike. Yeah, there's nothing faster in a strike than a death adder. I've seen a death adder take a finch flying past in midair.
It's a snake that should not be handled at any stage, as this agility can cause you a medical emergency.
Unlike a taipan or a brown snake, death adders can't be held by the tail, purely because they can reach their own tail at any time. So if I was to grab this snake by the tail, no matter where I held it, it could always come back and bite itself. For an Australian elapid, they're the only one that has those hinged fangs, which is quite difficult to handle. If you grab them in a head grip for a medical procedure, the fang will actually come out of the mouth and start looking for your fingers, which is very scary. And it's a bit like watching a predator take its mask off. Now, this is about as big as they get, and a lot of people underestimate snakes if they're small. Unfortunately, size has nothing to do with toxicity or deadliness. Unfortunately, had a gentleman die from a snake bite in 2008 in the Northern Territory, and the snake was only about 40 centimetres long. And he underestimated that because the snake was small, it wasn't dangerous, and that's certainly not the case.
So if you're in the lucky 50% of untreated victims that are not going to die, sometimes a death adder bite can just be uncomfortable.
Several years ago, I went to a snake call out in an outer suburb of Darwin, where a gentleman had one of these in his house and it had actually bitten him. And I bandaged him up and drove him to hospital, and he had excruciating pain. So the bite from a death adder, particularly the northern death adder, is very painful bite. And when I got this gentleman in the car, I made the mistake of describing to him how the neurotoxins work and what it could do to his body, and he proceeded to vomit all through my car.
The death adder family is divided into several branches, including the common death adder that is found in eastern and southern Australia. Its close cousin, the northern death adder, that lives in the very northern tropical areas of Western Australia, Northern Territory, and Queensland. And then the desert death adder. Unfortunately, its taste for frogs is threatening its very own existence, as many die eating a toxic pest that is known as the cane toad.
Death adders are one of the species that's been very badly affected by the arrival of cane toads in tropical Australia. It turns out that this strange little tail luring behaviour that the death adder uses is not incredibly effective on Australian frogs, because they've had a few million years to work out that something that twitches like that might be a death adder. But cane toads come from South America, where nobody plays that game, and so they come racing in to that little tail lure, and as a result, the adder bites the toad, and the adder is killed by the toad's poison.
The other danger to its population is the impact of humans clearing land, and this reduces the natural snake habitat. The death adder, unlike many other snakes, gives birth to a live litter of between 15 to 20 baby snakes, which can fend for themselves straight away. All death adders share pretty much the same body shape, features, and behavior. But no two adders have the same coloring, and this is what makes them masters of disguise.
It's very rare to see two the same. Even out of a clutch of death adders that are born, they'll all be different. Even most snakes don't throw the same colours, and their juvenile colours are quite different to their adult colours.
Either way, whether it's the northern, common, or desert adder, they are trouble, and so not something you want to stumble across at any time.
Top 10 Australian most venomous snakes for sure. The issue is what makes them dangerous in my book is their ability to conceal themselves. Because if you saw the snake, you wouldn't put your hands there, but you just don't see them. I don't catch that many in people's houses because people don't know they're there. Well, the best bet is to treat all snakes as venomous. Misidentification and handling a snake is going to lead to you getting bitten. And unfortunately, a lot of people have died in Australia thinking they've picked up a non-venomous snake. If you treat them all as venomous and don't touch them, you won't get bitten. Rule of thumb is be far enough away that you can put your thumb out in front of you and you can't see the snake, and that way you know you're far enough away.
Someone who failed that proximity rule was Brian Fry, as he was bitten whilst milking a death adder for venom.
Death adders are unusual amongst Australian snakes in that they have very agile fangs. And I remember watching it actually walk across my hand using its fangs. So I had 6 puncture wounds across the back of my hand. I knew, of course, at this point in time that we needed to go to the hospital. There's no way that I did not get anything but the maximum amount of venom.
The result was for Brian life-threatening.
So I would say that I was fully paralyzed within 90 minutes. So with the paralysis, I started struggling to breathe, which is a bit of a distressing feeling because my diaphragm was getting paralyzed. And that's the muscle that we use when we're inflating our lungs. If you can't move your diaphragm, you can't inflate your lungs, which means you're not getting any oxygen, which means you're going to die.
But what came next was a little surprising.
The best way to describe a death adder envenomation is not entirely unpleasant. Quite simply, the highest I've ever been in my life has been from death adder bites. And this is why Cleopatra committed suicide using a cobra, which is related to death adders. No doubt she had already put many a slave or political prisoner to death using snakes. So she knew that puff adders, the other local snake, people die screaming. Cobras, they didn't die screaming, they died smiling. So if you're ever going to go from a snake bite, I'd recommend death adder. It's a much better way of going than some of the other ones, like rattlesnake bites that I've had that have been extraordinarily painful.
I just like his ability to be able to sit there and just blend in. It just looks amazing. And the art form, if you see a lot of death adders, you start to see a lot of where the Aboriginal art comes from. A lot of their dot paintings you can see in the back of death adders when you start to look at them. They're just one of those great animals that you can sit back and look at and admire, but just admire it from a distance.
Much admired, but also to be feared, the death adder has earned its stripes and is heading straight to the top, knocking the might of the tiger shark to second, as well as tumbling the Colette snake, Jack jumper ant, and Australian bustard all down a notch. A big restructure as we introduce one of the most contentious animals of the series. Most of the 72 most dangerous animals in Australia leave little doubt as to their dangerous potential. But one controversial animal still divides the scientific and medical community. Taking the stand is the white-tailed spider, accused of causing horrific injury to humans, but never proven to be the culprit. The perpetrator's venomous bite is claimed to bring severe pain and ulceration, rot flesh, and even lead to death. A nighttime hunter that feeds on other spiders, the whitetail can be found across much of Australia. It features a distinctive white spot on the tip of its grey dorsal abdomen. Perth local Steve Brown was working on his race car when a spider struck. Perched on an old milk crate, Steve was at first unaware he had been bitten, but itchiness and pain was soon building.
I had a red mark on the top of my leg, sort of towards my bum, and as I looked closer, yep, there was 2 small puncture wounds.
With nausea and dizziness building, Steve quickly drove to his local doctor, certain a red-backed spider had bit him.
It started to scab up, and this was all within an hour or 2. So he examined me. He said, "I think you've been bit by a white-tailed spider because that's not a redback. Redbacks don't do that." And I think I passed out at that stage. The burning sensation was almost like I had sat on something really hot, like on an oven ring on a stove.
Steve was lucky, as he was bitten through thick clothing. The spider's fangs were likely cleaned before they penetrated his skin, removing harmful contamination left over from its last meal. While research assures us that its venom is not dangerous to humans, it's possible that the spider's dirty fangs could infect victims with other bacteria and dangerous diseases. White-tailed spider or not, the scientists have ruled it out. The victims want answers for their wounds. Whatever you decide, this controversial spider is clearly not going to dominate the danger list, but it will bump out the Australian bustard and claim its spot at number 5. This is the final program in the series of 72 Dangerous Animals Australia, so we're going to feature the top 20 most feared, most dreaded, and most dangerous. But first, we're going to start at the bottom. At number 72 is the Tasmanian tiger. Now extinct, but there are a few who believe it's lurking in the depths of the darkest forest in Tasmania, if you dare to explore. Zooming through the list from 20 are 10 animals you'd never want to encounter. At 20 is the Irukandji, thumbnail in size with an over-the-top pain factor. Stomping into 19 is the water buffalo. If it comes for you, run before it's too late. Equally scary, but minute by comparison, is the redback spider. It's sitting at 18. Slithering into 17 and 16 are 2 impressive snakes, the king brown and the aptly named death adder. Rearing up if under threat, the Sydney funnelweb is claiming number 15. Sliding into 14 is the tiger snake. It's an all-weather snake, so be on guard as it's also deadly. 13 is the number featured in horror stories and an ideal label for the cone snail. If you're harpooned, the lethal venom cocktail will take you down. As will the Johnston's crocodile. It's in at 12. The tiny but mighty blood-sucking beast that is the paralysis tick takes its spot at number 11 and completes a daunting list of 10 of Australia's most dangerous animals. But it's going to get more horrific as we sweep this list out and introduce the top 10. Starting with the stonefish at number 10, it's incredibly well camouflaged in the shallow reefs. You won't even know you're about to step onto a bunch of spines packed with venom sacs. But once you do, your pain barrier will explode. Taking your breath away could be the result of an encounter with the blue-ringed octopus. One bite and your diaphragm will collapse. The brown snake family, being the eastern brown, guater, and dugite, are dangerous snakes with a high venom rating. The eastern brown comes in at second in the world. Cruising through the ocean, just looking for food, but a case of mistaken identity, and the bull shark will leave many nasty injuries. From the might of the bull shark to the power of the mosquito, tiny, annoying, and dangerous, this small creature can cause severe, debilitating reactions. So there's just 5 to go in the list of Australia's most dangerous. Coming in at 5 is a set of snakes called the taipans. The recently discovered western desert taipan, thought to be more venomous than the eastern brown snake. The coastal taipan, that is the 3rd most venomous snake in the world, and continuing in the world snakes, the most venomous snake worldwide, the inland taipan. Flying into 4 is the honeybee. If you develop an allergic reaction and can't get medical attention, there's very little hope. And even if you've been stung in the past with no reaction, it doesn't mean your next sting will be okay. Even more dangerous in 3rd is the estuarine crocodile. Remarkably, this prehistoric animal has lived since the time of dinosaurs. It's an ambush predator, and if it gets you, there's very little chance of survival. Quiet, unassuming, and deadly is the box jellyfish. And if you become entangled in its tentacle, in just a couple of minutes, your system will completely shut down with no chance of coming back to life. Already a collection of animals you don't want to encounter, but there's one more, and it's claiming the spot of our most dangerous in Australia. The great white shark. It has a long history of attacks, and it's still making its mark amongst swimmers, surfers, and kayakers. It's not looking for humans, but if you're unlucky enough to be in the wrong spot, it'll take you. With all of our Australian animals, there is a fear factor. But keep in mind, they're unlikely to harm you unless you're unlucky enough or foolish enough to get in their way. Be cautious, take note of the warnings, and show respect for the engaging and eclectic mix of beasts that add up to 72 Dangerous Animals Australia.